Not yet. So it says we're live, does it, Simon?
Let's just checking it, just see when it comes up. Let's,
Hey now.
hey now. There we are, live now. Let's turn on the live one. There
So
we
it's
are.
5:47 p.m. Sunday evening in New Zealand.
Yep.
And so it must be 6:47 a.m. Bristol, England.
Welcome to Bristol, England, 6:47 a.m. on. Yeah, what is the date today? September the 15th.
So that's commitment, getting out of bed early on a Sunday morning. That's commitment, man.
yeah, I should be committed. Yes, it's what you're saying.
How are you, mate?
British. I get up early. I have a cup of tea. It's all good. Yeah, I'm good. yeah, good. Another week down.
And counting.
It's been a good week.
Before you know it, you'll be forking out money for Christmas.
I'm feeling I already have. No, I haven't. Do you do exciting things for Christmas? I don't know if I told you so. We've mentioned the C word, and it's only September, but whatever.
Right. Okay, I've been scolded.
Yeah, well, no, it's fine. Yeah, we do. My whole family gets together in this house in North Devon. So there's about 18 of us. So my brother, my two sisters, all our kids, my mum. She very kindly pays for it. It's very nice. And yeah, so there's about 18 of us, something like that. Get together and we have a sort of week away, kind of playing.
We got
playing jolly games. DR guitars, yeah. There it is, beautiful. I'm getting to grips with the technology. So yeah, we go away. We have a week away. That Christmas week away. I'm not very far. It's only an hour and a half from where I live. So
that's good.
But yeah, get together for a week. It's really nice. It's really nice, and we all get on, fantastically well. The kids all get on. They love the cousins and stuff, And we have a weird family card game called Racing Demon, which is you can get like a dozen people playing it. You can get however many each person needs a pack of cards basically, and then it's a sort of melee to get rid of whatever cards you. And the bad language is terrible. It's very, very, but it's fantastic fun. And what's interesting is the only other person is called Racing Demon, right?
Wow.
And the only other person I've ever heard talk about it is the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Wow.
and apparently he plays it, Justin Welby. So there's us with incredible amounts of bad language. I'm sure doesn't happen around the Archbishop of Canterbury's table. No. playing the same thing as us. That's funny.
Hey, you know how our show is always under the table and under the radar. We just hang out and
do stuff.
And talk about stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of things I'd like to mention to you. All the shows we've done. The first show with over 100 views was the first show we did with you.
Really? Blimey. Yeah.
Yeah. And wow. The second show that we got 100 views, over 100 views, was the show that we did a week ago with Richard Fox.
Yeah.
The Prince of the Voodoo Lounge.
The Prince of the Voodoo Lounge. You got to have a title, haven't you? A good title goes a long way. And I think the Prince of the Voodoo Lounge is as good as you're ever going to have, isn't it?
I think so. Well, he can't be the king, can he? He can't be the king because, that's either Keith or Mick.
Yeah, you see, now we're in tricky. Which one which one of these is the king of the Voodoo Lounge? Is it Mick or is it Keith? I was thinking of Keith as the Prince of Darkness, but maybe not. The Prince of Darkness in the Voodoo Lounge. But yeah, maybe that's not true.
In 4 weeks' time, when he's back on for another show, we'll ask him. That's one of the questions. But
yeah, it's a good idea. Yes, we need to ask him.
it'll be good to get his opinion on that. But
yeah,
no. To be fair though, Simon, it was that 2.5 hours went pretty quickly. It was amazing. You and I have been doing these shows now, for about a year, and an hour's quick. Before you know it, an hour and a half. Gone.
Yeah, yes, and that was getting on for 2 3/4 hours, wasn't it? It was long.
And you might have 5 or 6 points that we're going to talk about, and you've only spoken about half a point. So,
yeah, that's fine. I'm all for that. Get your nonsense into early, kind of thing, and
what's kind of interesting is that if people weren't aware, anyone in the chat who's going to watch a replay, Carl met Richard about 30 years ago, and I didn't know anything about Richard until another English guy who watches our channel, Dave, sent me a link and said, "Hey, you need to get this guy on." And he only lives like an hour and a half away from me, or less than an hour and a half. So So interesting. Another great thing about social media, Simon, our community, it's pretty small, but it's global.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's the amazing thing to me about it. And when people say to me, what do you do? I say, I'm on the YouTube. I said, I've chosen somebody to do a show with who's as far away from me as possible. I make Johnny Bean and Dave Nesdall look like neighbours, don't we? You and I.
Yeah.
Why haven't they met? But that is the beauty of it, is that actually your interests can now be not the people you've met in your local area, whatever. They just could be. You could be anywhere. And join in and kind of have a community, I describe it as like, it's like the video version of going down the pub with your mates and talking about the things you all like, guitars and music and bloody blah, and what bands you're going to see. And completely. But, the fact that you happen to live in New Zealand, I happen to live in the UK, seems to be immaterial, except the time differences. But for me, it's exactly the same thing. The same things, and the same more benefits really, because you get people from other countries is always a good idea.
Well, I've always wanted to hang out with people that knew and know stuff. I've always wanted to hang out with people who I could ask a question and get an answer, and share some opinions. And social media is great for that, because you can find people, and create that environment. And our show's only a small show, and like I've said to you many times, we're not interested in world domination. We're just two guys hanging out.
We certainly aren't. Which is what I think is really cool. That sort of the ability to find other people who like what you like, and and are interested in the same things as you. It suddenly became, in this kind of arena becomes much easier, and but also much more fun.
And see your Rory Gallagher show that you led a couple of weeks ago, or a week, was it 2 weeks ago? See, we got some good comments in the chat where people watched the show, and they were recommending books and albums and
stuff. It's really good. I think that for me, it's exactly that. I don't profess to know billions about everything, but as a group of people, i.e. not just you and I, but Dave Arks Guitars, and Dave, and whoever else comes on. They got things to contribute, and these things are about what everyone contributes. I hope that they can send me to things that I haven't seen before.
And I think the person that was making those comments about Rory, was that that Canadian Chicks and Guitars?
Yeah, Chicken Guitars. Yeah. Kaylin,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Didn't she do a Rory Gallagher? She's a bit like you. Maybe she didn't. Maybe that was you mixing the two. Yeah, about having doing a kind of relic Rory Gallagher thing. But yeah, she's got a thing for Rory Gallagher for sure. Well done.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
and so I sort of sit back and go, oh, okay, yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah.
But to be fair, though, Simon, to be fair, even though we're Stones nuts and we're Clapton nuts, and we'll always be talking about the Stones and Clapton, we're also accidentally. Oh wow! We just only found out, people. You're a Beatles nut.
Yeah. Interestingly, Days Are Guitars, she just said that Kaylin, she built a Rory inspired telly. I knew she'd done some Rory inspired thing. It was a telly. Thank you, Dave. Reminded me somewhere in the depths of my old
series.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
She did that over about what, 4 or 5 shows.
Yeah, few videos and stuff. Yeah. It's always really good to see people, do stuff.
Yeah.
I think that I find those things really, really inspiring. And you think, well, maybe I could do that. Having thought I could possibly build a guitar, cack-handed idiot I am with you think, well, maybe, she might have inspired me. I've thought about it a bit. I don't know about you. Have you thought about building your own guitar like that?
No. I'll relic a guitar and I'll make some mods like my ES355 here. I've whipped out the standard pickups with it, and I've put in some tone riders. But that's all. I don't have the patience, Simon. To
do you use solder and things like that?
I don't have the patience to build a guitar, and I take my hat off to people. Hey, Arvin, I take my hat off to people who do.
Morning, Arvin. Yeah. I mean, I think I probably would have the patience to do it. I think there'd be quite a lot of things that'd be quite a sharp learning curve for me. Like I've never really done any soldering. By the way, let's call it soldering because it's got an L in it, not soldering. I was having a joke with Quentin about
he wrote English in New Zealand.
Yeah,
soldering.
He'd written solder, and I said rather cheekily, "Oh look, I didn't realise that solder had an L in it." Those Americans and their soldering.
Quentin F. and James.
Yeah. that guitar plate with that on it's just brilliant, isn't it? It's just this. Quentin F. and James. No swearing, please. Family show.
Yeah. You can imagine his grade teacher saying that. He's probably heard that all his life. Oh, who's got Quentin F. and James this year? I have. Oh,
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Do you think he was called that when he was 5?
By the neighbours.
What's your name, little boy? Quentin F. and James.
Oh my dear. We'll have to timestamp this and send the link to him so that he can see that we're talking about him disrespectfully.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, he'll find out. That's particularly funny, I think, as the mighty Quentin. Oh dear. Of course, he's getting his new guitar on Monday. He's beside himself, isn't he? Have you seen that? He's getting the Gomacaster that Dave asked him about. It's such a cool thing to do, Dave. And he's like, besides, I keep saying things like, I hope is it up front with the driver? Is he looking after it? And stuff. No, no
Arvin's
pickup.
asking me what I think about these pickups. So these pickups are tone riders, Arvin, and they're voiced on the Gibson pickups, El Nico Falls. And what's interesting about buying these, they were $200 for a set, and anything around the Gibson quality was about $600 to $700. So it was a no-brainer getting these. But yeah, they've got the treble's very, very good. It's nice, rich treble compared to the standard Epiphones, which incidentally, according to all the reviews, are pretty good pickups anyway. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But are they the original ones, Andrew? They
no,
came with the guitar. You swapped them out.
no, I swapped them out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. Did you do that yourself?
no,
Talking
I
of
did it with a
soldering,
friend. I did it
you
with a
got
friend.
got a man
I
to come
stood
around with a
there.
soldering iron.
I stood there and I passed the screwdriver.
Good. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah. Isn't that what guitar techs are for? Yeah. Sadly, we don't live. Yeah. Oh, I've got some fine ones. Bristol's fine for there's a few good people in Bristol that do it, but it'd be nice if I lived a bit closer to people like Dave R or someone like that. People you've
Yeah,
met, kind of thing.
yeah.
That would be cool, but I don't think Dave R would appreciate me sending my guitar across the Atlantic to him for a quick setup.
Yeah, the
So
shipping
cool.
bill would be. You might as well just go and buy another guitar, Simon, for when you
Yeah,
probably
for the
take.
shipping bill. Yeah.
Yeah. Um.
Yes, it is, Dave. Yes, Dave said, for your information, pickups for wiring in a semi-hollow hollow body is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, I've seen people. I think Rhett Shaw was what you do. There's a lot of you had to tie something on and pull it through, and oh
Yes.
blimey, before you took it up, it seemed very complicated. That's why you have a
And
man to do it for you.
my friend also kept, because it's coil tap too, so he kept that on it. And I said to him, "Don't worry about that because I won't use it." And he said, "No. We'll just spend the extra half an hour and fiddle around making sure that we do it because you'll probably want it." So
Yeah, yeah. He's obviously got thin, long fingers, not short, fat, stubby ones like I've got, which wouldn't even fit through the F hole. And then
I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it, Dave. It was bad enough me having to change a scratch plate on my Strat. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I couldn't do it.
Oh, I've done some bits about repairing the socket and stuff like that, and I am capable. But you just for me soldering, for instance, is a good example. So I've never really done it, and I've seen some guys doing it on here. Yeah, Dave, that's right. Yeah, sausages that hang off my palms. That's me. And it's and it's sort of interesting to see the guys on here doing it. And you get an idea about what you should do. And the way you should do it. So I don't got too many things. Arvin's asking me a question. Have you ever seen Sam Deeks' vlog? He's a guitar tech somewhere near Bristol, I think. No, Arvin, I haven't. I'll check him out and see. I don't know who Sam Deeks is. I'll check see where. I'm sure there's quite a few in Bristol. I know 3 or 4 in Bristol. A couple via shops and a couple via, direct thing. Yeah, Dave, that's right. It's not it's a learned skill. Yeah, I need to learn it. I need to do some learning in all my free time. Look, what's this? What are you holding up? This is today's subject, children. Is 20. You have 20 minutes on the Beatles.
Look, I think it was inevitable. It was we threatened to talk about this about 6 or 7 months ago, didn't we? To do a
We did.
series on the Beatles. Yep.
Yeah. We did. We've been threatening for a while.
Yeah.
And it kind of lines up with the it's going to be the 50th anniversary of Abbey Road released, isn't it, in a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Kind of thing, which would be really cool. See what they come up with.
I'm looking forward to the series, Simon, on it. So So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you if you can just if we can do just a bit of an intro
Yeah,
into probably an in-depth discussion on Abbey Road. Obviously, we're guitar players, so I'd like to talk about a bit of the gear. Obviously, that that
that they
went
used.
into and into
Yeah,
some of the recordings, and we've also mentioned Glyn Johns in the past and some of these producers. So I think, if we can talk about even some of the recording techniques, because they were groundbreaking when it came to their albums, even their early albums. Everyone talks about Sergeant Pepper's being a technological breakthrough, but jeepers, go back to those early 4-track albums that they were doing, and 2 tracks even. They were
yeah. First,
they were
yeah,
groundbreaking.
three 2-hour sessions to record their first album. 2 tracks
Yeah,
straight to.
yeah,
You know, all the production is pre-recording, which I think is one of the interesting things about that. that what you actually arrive at on tape is the finished article.
yeah.
There's
So
no,
what are the
there's
Beatles?
no.
Sorry, Simon.
Go on, I don't know. I guess which I think is really, and and obviously that graduation away from just really capturing the live thing as best you can, which is the initial thing. You go in, you play a song, 1, 2, 3, 4, play
Yep.
through it, and then you either get a good take of it or you maybe do another one. And and then they obviously get more into the technology way. You can suddenly separate the tracks out more, and then you can start to do more post production and things like that, and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. Dr. Dave saying he's got an original introducing the Beatles on VJ Records. So VJ being the American label they were on.
Yeah. Well, what's
Unfortunately, it's not
interesting about
stereophonic. They weren't stereophonic.
no,
They were all in mono.
yeah.
All the early Beatles stuff was in mono. I mean,
But
even Sergeant Pepper's was released. The first release of it was mono,
that's
wasn't it?
correct.
Wasn't stereo.
Yeah.
And they did sort of stereo mixes for kind of as a sort of almost as an
That's why
afterthought.
the one that Giles did last year, the 50th anniversary remix. That's why that's so important. It's critical. It's critical
Because that's
to
the stereo one.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Did George Martin do stereo stuff? I mean, Dave's saying he's got a pressing of it in stereophonic. To put stereophonic.
I
It's,
I
I
I
can't
think we
remember,
need to
but
get Carl on here to discuss it. But
yeah,
I
we need
think
to look
Carl was
into it in more detail.
I think stereophonic is when they were playing it mono, but on 2 channels or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, I see.
Maybe
Yeah, yeah. So you have the same thing going out of both speakers. You're
yeah.
not you're
So,
not you're not saying, right, I'm going to put the guitars over on one. Yeah. I understand. Yeah,
yeah.
yes. Which I put. Yeah, mono. Yeah. As opposed to So we have.
So
Look at that.
so what do the Beatles mean for you, Simon?
Well,
Talk to me.
well,
Tell me
I
about.
guess like you. So I'm so the first thing I should say is I'm old. I'm 61. So I kind of grew up with the Beatles in a funny kind of way. My as I've said on here before, my dad was a composer, so he's very interested in. Obviously, we had a lot of classical music in the house, quite a lot of jazz and stuff. Not so much pop music, but my mum, I think, was a bit more interested in that. So growing up, we had, and my introduction to the Beatles was Hard Day's Night. We had Hard Day's Night, and we had Help, and we had Rubber Soul. And I think we had Sergeant Pepper's as well. So I remember those 4 Beatles albums being in our house as we grew up. Funny enough, I don't know where they came from because I can't think that my dad actually bought them. But maybe my uncle, who was only about 12 years older than me, and maybe he bought them. So yes, I can't say. I can't say that I can remember where they came from, but I remember playing them on the stereo we had in the house. There's another interesting question. What musical thing did you have in your house that you played records on when you were growing up?
Record player.
Did you have a record player? Yeah. See, in the 60s, a lot of people had stereograms, which are these great big kind of walnut cabinets, which you opened up, and then inside was this record player. Obviously, only a single speaker and stuff, but we actually had a stereo. My dad had a stereo and a separate stereo, which must have been quite modern, I think. But he actually had a beautiful record player in a wooden cabinet. It was just a record player, but in a nice kind of beautiful wooden cabinet. I don't know where that ever went. I think it must have just broken probably. And instead of saving it, we bought a new one with a perspex lid rather than a beautiful wooden one. But
I remember those.
Beautiful kind of in the age when people made things and put them into cabinets, with wood and bits of furniture, and kind of tried to make things look cool rather than just have a thing perspex, different colour black metal I've got for all my separate bits and all of that. So and we used to play them. I used to play them when I was a kid. I loved them, of course. Hard Day's Night, really, really good. Yeah, Darwin, that's true. Yeah, the mono mixes were the ones, and they just got the stereo was obviously not nearly as important, which is funny. But considering when you get up to the sort of late 60s, early 70s, stereo was all the thing then. But yeah, they have a power to them. Mono has a power to it. Absolutely, it does. Look at that, Dave Ars, the late 70s. My grandparents had a long. Thanks, Dave. That'll be me then. Yes, that's it. And Jason Wade. Jason, good morning. How you doing? Had a head for bed. Yes, I don't blame you. Yes, it's late, isn't it? Where you are, but so yeah. As I say, the Beatles. I sort of discovered the. True enough, Dave. True enough. It just makes me feel old, But as I say, so I didn't discover the Beatles. I grew up with them, if you like. Part of the soundtrack of my. I was born in 1958. So it's kind of that's the soundtrack of my pre-teen years, really growing up. What about you? When did you? Because Angie, you're obviously younger than me, so I take it you didn't discover them straight off.
I think I've touched on this on a show with Carl. I certainly remember hearing the Beatles on the radio because they were radio music. So I'm.
So was this
50.
even in the 70s?
Well, this is yeah. So like in 1980 they'd be playing the Beatles on the radio. So you knew who the Beatles were. But did I listen to them? No. And in fact, I even remember Yellow Submarine. We were singing Yellow Submarine at school. It was a It was a song that we sang. But the epiphany for me and because all of us guitar players and music fans, we remember the first time we've heard something. And that's one of the great things about music, that we can go back into this capsule. But I remember going to my nana's place, and my uncle just had all these records, and for some reason I picked up Beatles for Sale, and I remember dropping that on the record player, one of the record players that you just described earlier, with the flip lid. With the flip lid.
Yeah. Cabinet with a speaker in it and all of that, and all the guitar. Did it have the elongated spindle where you could put like 10 singles on it, and they would play them all one after the other?
That's right.
Yes, come on.
It was a flash old one, Simon.
I think that's very cool. That's not flash. That's cool. That's proper. Right? Yeah. Sorry, just to die. But that thing where you put on, or is it 10 singles, a stack of 10 singles, and and they dropped down one after another, and they would all play. That's just that seemed magical to me. That kind of you didn't have to get up for half an hour because you could play 10 singles. 10 singles. You know, these days, streaming, you don't even born.
That was the moment for me, to hear no reply, and what stuck out, Simon, was the harmonies, the singing. You
Yeah.
know, I could hear John, I could hear Paul, I could, this happened once before. I won't say, and this, and I fell in love with the singing, the harmonies, and that was the moment for me. And then obviously, becoming 6 months later a guitar player because of that, because I wanted to play along to "Can't Buy Me Love" and
Yeah.
"Help." I wanted to play along
Oh,
to
okay. Yeah.
Sympathy for
Yeah.
the Devil, and Satisfaction. I wanted to hear. So I'm going to stick my hand up, and I think Simon's going to make a declaration too. And we spoke about this before the show. So
Yeah.
we
Yeah. Yeah. Go
we
on.
we,
Yeah.
we don't see a dichotomy or a contradiction between being Beatles and Stones fans, guys. All right, we see them,
Both. Yeah.
both equally and viable and inspiring, amazing. So yeah, so I was learning Beatles while I was listening to the Stones, vice versa. But that was it for me, Simon. Certainly,
Yeah. Dropping it on
that
at
album.
your grandparents' house. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Yes, and glad you know what a radiogram is. And I think that I mean Dave asked us. It was saying born in 75, 75. So he knew where they were. See, I mean, yes, I mean, they become a sort of background thing, don't they? But
Yeah, yeah,
you know, his parents were more into the Ventures and Eagle and Elvis and stuff. Yeah, yeah, I could see that being a thing. Yeah, but yeah, for me, as I said, they were really, as I said, because I was born in '58, so they were the soundtrack through the '60s. You know, my growing up coincided with their musical development and things, which is. Although it was obviously mixed in with a lot of other stuff, and I wouldn't say that I started to really. I wouldn't say it really. I can't. Yes, I mean we've discussed it a bit before, but and I do know what it is. But the first time you heard a song that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, that kind of visceral excitement or something, and and I don't think I ever felt that about the Beatles, or not till later. But kind of. Um, but I knew they were. It's one of those things. You intrinsically know when something is really good, don't you? You know. I mean,
absolutely.
I couldn't have. If you said to me why are they good,
Yep,
I wouldn't have had a first idea about why they were
yep,
good. But I
yep,
knew that they were. I knew that they had something
yeah,
special.
yeah,
Something different, something interesting.
yeah.
Especially you get to the later stuff. Good night, Jason. Sleep well, man.
Good night, Jace. Always a pleasure to see you. Thanks, brother.
Yes, Arvin, you and I are the same age. There, I see. Which is cool. So, I think that that as I say, and because my thing was mixed up with a load of other stuff. As I said, my dad was a composer, therefore, there's a lot of classical music, a lot of other music going on. He's very much a jazz guy. My dad, my mum too. So, a lot of Art Tatum and Oscar Peterson. My dad liked Oscar Peterson a lot, the Canadian piano player. And then not so much kind of modern, not sort of bebop, but sort of pre that a bit really. I think for my dad, because he was older. But yeah, so the Beatles have been a soundtrack to my life, and I've loved them for since then. Really, I did love them then. As a because let's face it, they had the songs. Whatever all those songs, the songs they wrote for Hard Day's Night and stuff, and you go, I love those songs. I love those songs. And it's like, not particularly difficult songs, but they had something. They had that spark, that kind of originality, that kind of energy, that verve, that kind of optimism of of a kind of a sort of bright future, really. You know, I think that's what drives me nuts about a lot of modern music. You know, it doesn't have a kind of that bright, optimistic feel to it. But which is, I suppose, a development. But it's I that's what I loved about it. I think, in kind of keeping with the '60s, really. It was the sound of the '60s, and that's why, because it captured that feeling of optimism, that feeling of going from grey into colour. Kind of very much captured that. In the sound of it, not just just songs, but kind of more than that. They have a cultural resonance, because of the time they were in and what they were doing and when they were.
I remember,
Yes.
I remember, Simon, in '95 when they were releasing on television here part one of Anthology, and it was a big
Yeah.
deal. I remember rushing home to watch that and being excited as heck to watch what was going on. One of the things that amazes me about the Beatles, Simon, is my appreciation for them has grown as I've gotten older. And one of the reasons why is that, we're lucky now. We've got a plethora of scholarly books out there now which analyze not only the cultural context of the time that they were growing up in, but also the music, which is really, really interesting, because I've got a couple of videos on the channel here where I'm doing a bit of a review on some of my Beatles
Is
books
that
that
the
I've
Mark
read over.
Lewisham? Is that the Mark Lewisham book?
No, this is the
Oh,
songwriting
right,
secrets
okay.
of the
Oh, yeah.
of the Beatles, and it's by a guitar player, 4 guitar players.
Mm-hmm.
And what's really interesting about the Beatles, if people weren't aware of this, is that the Beatles weren't trained musicians. They couldn't read music, but they instinctively knew chord progressions, where to put a chord, and this is something that's just I want to talk to you more and more about as we progress with the series, because that instinctiveness that they had when they were 15 or 16, that they developed right through into the '60s, and then they took that instinctiveness into the recording process and became producers themselves and instrumental in determining what was being recorded. It's it's uh it's at the level of being geniuses, Simon.
Yeah, I
I
think that we can examine this, but I think that you're right. The sophistication was there. That
Yes,
to do more than just 1 1 3 5 kind of thing, or 1 3 4. That kind of chord. There's always the thing about do more chords than that, and I think it's part of their musical upbringing and where they were.
yeah,
In the '50s and stuff. And their influences. Things that they're
jazz for a
well,
starter.
jazz, and also
Lennon talks about.
music hall as well.
Yep, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Paul's dad being he was it his dad or his grandfather that played in a band, in a
I
like a
think
show band.
his dad did, didn't he? I
Yeah,
think wasn't his dad a musician? I think Paul. Yeah, I
yeah,
think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So but yes, absolutely. But playing in a different genre, playing musical, playing whatever, where there's a sort of level of sophistication. I think what's interesting about there's a lot of very sort of technical explanations, but that I've seen particularly Rick Beato say this. Say that what's actually happened is if you compare the Beatles songs to a song from now, the Beatles song is way more sophisticated, and
absolutely.
actually that today's music is a kind of dumbing down of that, and is a kind of when they hear the Beatles, it's much more difficult to get into because because they because they aren't because they're much more sophisticated. There's different things going on in those in those songs, and different chord changes and odd things here and there that are not present in particularly a lot of modern music now. which is kind of honed down to it to a few things. Was it 1, 4, 5, 6 or something? Most pop records have 1, 4, 5, 6, I think, something like that. And to me that's interesting, and you can see that if you've got all those differences, it's not just rock and roll, which we've spoken about, is the 3 chords, but they obviously had other influences than that, and that played into, which is where I think someone like George Martin was probably really good for them, because he didn't come from a pop background. He came from much more of a sort of pre-pop background in a way.
Well, he's a genius himself, isn't he? And
the fifth Beatle.
Yeah, and reading a little bit more about him over the last couple of years, we need to draw him into the spotlight a little bit more, because there's a crucial thing that he identified. So he's sitting there in his control booth watching this band, and he's trying to work out who the leader is when they're recording, doing some demos. He's trying to work.
Because there's always a leader.
He's trying to work out, and then the penny drops, and the Beatles didn't tell him this is who we are by saying this is who we are. They went there, plugged in, sat there, and performed, and then he realized, we don't have a lead singer.
No. Yeah, because you've got 2.
We've got 2 singers and a guy over here who can sing pretty good too.
Yeah. And suddenly everything becomes a 2-part harmony. Then it becomes 2 lead singers almost, then, doesn't it? All that early stuff has that kind of Everly Brothers harmony. 2 people singing.
So people have argued this, Simon, and I kind of agree with it. And you may have heard it too. If that band was in America, it wouldn't have happened like that. The producer would have said at that time, one of yous are singing or get out.
Really? Do you think? Yeah, I don't. Well, but maybe. Yeah, I don't. I mean, did they used to do that, or do you think they would have just figured it out?
Well, I'm just.
I would hope
I'm just sharing something that
was been said. Yeah. I've not heard that before. That's interesting. Yeah, as I said, it's not. Yeah, I wonder why they would. I mean, it's very difficult to know, isn't it? American producers, in the early '60s and stuff. What's that? Coming up. I don't know what they're. But see, there would have been a lot of hip kind of rock and roll guys around then, wouldn't there? Kind of who, and then obviously people like the Everly Brothers and stuff had already done that, or done that sort of way. So I think that Morning Soda, how you doing?
I think the argument though is if you've got a duo, well, obviously they're going to accept singing.
Yeah. Whereas if you've got a band,
but in a band,
you need a focal point.
Yeah. So top marks to George
Martin.
George Martin, and identifying that, and again, that was probably the first mold break.
Yeah. Yes, I think you're right about that. Yeah. Yes, of course, yeah. That twin lead vocals thing, and kind of, and whoever wrote the song then sung it.
Hey, so
that was one of the things that impressed John when he first met Paul, wasn't it? That Paul could do both things. He could do Little Richard,
and apparently his hairs used to stand on the back of his neck. He loved it. They'd have a couple of pints, and they'd get Paul to do his Little Richard.
Do his Little Richard, yeah.
Which is what mates do.
Yeah, well, completely. Do that little Richard.
Go on, show us Eruption.
I think we may be off to a volcano for that. Might be quicker. You're just picking on me now. Yeah, absolutely, Arvin. Yeah, times when you can't tell one voice. Arvin's saying there's one point you can't tell where one voice stops and the other begins, and there's harmony parts, and that's the point. They sang, was it a third above and stuff, but they sang together. You know.
Okay, well, can I just jump in there, because I'm glad Arvin mentioned that, because there's this book here which is called Blue Notes and Sad Chords,
Cool. Oh, right, cool, yeah.
and it's a guy
Color
that's
code.
analyzing the 27 number one hits. And so what he's done here in this book is he's specifically concentrated on the harmonies and where they come in on the intro, the verse, refrain, and the outro on songs. And it's phenomenal, because he's saying again in this book, I'm not saying it, that these guys that it wasn't just a fluke. These guys worked it out, Simon, beforehand.
Yeah.
It was all worked out. Simon, you're going to sing this verse. I'm going to come in here, and
Yeah.
then George is going to come in, and then you're going to go higher than whatever chord I'm singing.
Yeah. What, you mean the Beatles worked it out and stuff like that? I mean, John and Paul worked it out between them. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Man, they were tight. They were tight, Simon.
Well, and there's been a lot of talk about that. That all those hours spent playing in the Reaper Barn in Hamburg. Playing 5 sets a night, kind of thing. Banging them out, all sorts of. And I think that's one of the other things, is that all sorts of songs, not just rock and roll songs, but lots of different
They were singing
genre things.
country
Are broad, but yeah. Doing some Frank Sinatra stuff, and all manner of things that you could fit into what being in a covers band was in the late 50s, the 60, kind of 1959, 60. And I think it's easy to forget or just to concentrate on the rock and roll bit as that part of their education, where actually the whole thing was much broader than that. And those set lists that they had were on a broader scale and introduced many more, different sophisticated songs and musical things that they could then take forward, and they start building, making their own songs, obviously, because that's what they did.
Yeah.
That's yes, it's it's very interesting, that kind of that level of sophistication and that breadth. The more things you could go back to strike up with the piano and give us a song.
No, I'm just grabbing some notes because there's a conversation I want to have with you that
Oh,
you.
cool! Yeah.
Just hold on.
Hey, did you say notes?
Well, actually, it's just a CD cover. But
that's notes.
A couple of shows ago, you mentioned to me, I don't know whether it was something that you said online or it was in the chat before a show. You said to me that Ringo is a phenomenal drummer, and he had swing.
Yeah. I tell you what it was. It's because I happened to come across on YouTube that the concert for George that they put on the Albert Hall.
Yeah.
He comes on, and he, I don't think that was, but there was a 15-minute bit with basically Paul McCartney. But what struck me really forcibly was that that Ringo and drumming. You think, man, this what I can't remember what they played was just stupid. But the swing that they put into it was amazing. And you thought it absolutely. You could go, and it had a real swing to it, and you go, that's God. No wonder that for me that makes it a real band. If you can get that swing, and they had it in spades.
Well, I listened
amazing.
to this album about 2 days after you said that.
Right.
And I'm going to tell you, I listened to it again with a fresh set of ears. Something popped out, and it was the swing on, for example, Nowhere Man. If you listen to the drumming on Nowhere Man and In My Life, Simon, you're not listening to a guy that's just playing the drums. It's phenomenal what Ringo was doing.
Yeah.
The way it's just
Yeah, and that thing about, that thing that people go, oh, he wasn't a very good drummer or whatever. It's like, no, he wasn't very good. He was phenomenal, and he made the Beatles. Well, and anybody who thinks that that's not true, that somehow they would have been better with somebody else, I think is just plain wrong. I think he was. You listen to those things and you think, I mean, that was my overriding impression. Is blimey, that thing,
Yep.
and you could see, God, if he played out in my band, you'd be dancing,
Yeah.
you'd be, and all those amazing. I mean, there's a lot of talk, but there's amazing kind of. You can hear his individual drum tracks for Rain and stuff, and
Rain's phenomenal. Yeah, so
yeah,
and then there's like 50 other songs, but I want to thank you because I was I I'm listening and I'm just, for some reason, it's one of these voodoo things that you, you're hearing and I'm going, Simon. So
yeah,
and you can hear this guy's just not drumming; he's swinging. He's doing something. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah, you're
yeah,
phenomenal.
yeah,
Interesting
yeah,
though that you should go on about him. If you guys aren't aware of this, and for a long time I didn't know the full story, but George Martin had rehearsed the Beatles with Pete Best and had booked Andy White because
yeah.
he knew
That's
that
right.
Pete
Yeah,
Best was the
wasn't very
drummer.
good. Yeah,
They got
yeah,
rid of Pete Best, and Andy White was already there. So when Ringo came into the studio to record, um, they already had the drummer. So it wasn't an indictment against Ringo's drumming. It was actually the drummer beforehand who
yeah,
he
yeah.
couldn't, apparently he couldn't hold a beat.
No, and I think that's right. And I think that what it's one of those things, isn't it? You could write a book on this. Great decisions in rock and roll. Made and that decision to and in that sense, him obviously played with them for a while, and that the fact that they were better than he was, and he wasn't going to be there, and they replaced the weak link with a really strong link,
Isn't it
in Ringo.
interesting though? Isn't it
You know,
interesting, Simon, that you hear all these bullshit rumors early on? One of the earliest rumors I heard, or reasons that they got rid of Pete Best, is because he had more girl followers. But yeah,
no, it's a
that was
musical
the
reason.
reason why they ditched them. Actually, the real reason why they ditched them is because George Martin told
Not that great a drummer.
Epstein that he's a shit drummer.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, not shit, but but he could see that that they were great and they'd be greater without
Get another drummer.
without if they got a better drummer in than if they got him, and I think that that is true. You cannot deny the fact that is true. And as I said, I'm sure there's a book in things rock great decisions in rock and roll kind of thing. Where
Yeah.
managers or whatever have made decisions about bands. And obviously the Rolling Stones is the other obviously example. Where they had not Mickey Stewart, Ian
Brian Jones.
Stewart.
Oh,
Ian
Ian Stewart.
Stewart,
Yeah.
no, with his
Yeah.
lantern jaw. He's a bit older than
Yes.
lantern jaw. And Andrew New Goldham said,
You do.
no, he doesn't fit. His image doesn't fit the band, which is a bloody harsh thing to say.
But
It is.
yeah,
But in terms of actually, that's the truth of it. If you're doing a band that's going to appeal to girls, you need to have young, handsome guys in it. At face facts, that's never been said before, is it? I can think of other examples of that. Where there's a band here called Wet, Wet, Wet.
yep.
And a massive hit with the Trog song, Love Is All Around. But
Yep.
they had a keyboard player who was older, than the rest of them, and he never appeared in any of the photographs.
No, three of them.
He never appeared.
It was just three of them.
Played on all the records, played on all the gigs, never appeared in the things. And frankly, I'm not saying that's a bad deal myself. I think actually, the ability to be able to go down to your local pub and have a pint, with with a good wad of cash in your pocket, nobody knows who you are. That can't be a bad thing, really, can it?
No, but I
But
agree with you. I think what's really interesting is that that conversation that George Martin had with Brian Epstein, who clearly knew the music industry, had a very good ear. He knew what he was listening to, and agreed. Went and had a chat with the band, and the band said, "Yep, get rid of him. We want Ringo. You do it."
yeah. Well, yes, there is a lot of that about, isn't there? Yeah. You're the manager. You do it. What? Yeah. Yes. I'm sure there's a lot of that, but yeah. But yeah, but you see, from a purely a musical band progression, you know, point of view, it was the right decision. You get a guy in who's not that great. I mean, the other example, so I can think of another example. Another example I know is a bit off the beaten track, matter, is Bruce Springsteen, who
Mhm.
the first two albums he made was with a guy called Vinny Mad Dog Lopez. But
Mhm.
he realised that Vinny was all right, but actually he wasn't that great a drummer. So he had to go. He went. They was, and they auditioned a load of other drummers, until they got Max Weinberg. Max Weinberg is a great drummer. And then you can see that Max Weinberg comes in. They make Born to Run. Oh yeah, and then it all takes off. Not saying that it wasn't there already, but and that's probably. But yet another decision where somebody plays, somebody gets a band of mates together. Particularly those East Coast musicians, New Jersey musicians, and but somebody isn't good enough. When you go into the big stage, good club drummer, good that level, but when you go to the next level, it's not and you get people in who have no vested interest in it, like obviously John Lando and Jimmy Iovine, and they recognise that actually, do you know what? You need to get a better drummer, Mind you, there's always an exception there. So, was it Stan Lynch, the drummer from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers? Jimmy Iovine didn't like him at all. Kept saying he's rubbish, but actually he's the best drummer for. And that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? That he's the best drummer for Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers.
Mm.
You know, and I think it's a bit like Larry Mullins. With in U2, they tried to chuck him out. They say he's not very good, but actually, until somebody said, "You've got a problem there. It's his band." you
Well,
know.
well, that's one of the great things that this guy here, Jonathan Gould, talks about. Because again, what I like, Simon, is I like to read books by other musicians, and this guy's a musician.
Mm.
He's saying clearly, if anybody's ever played with in a band, when you're playing live, you can get away with a lot of things. You can have a drummer that's a little bit behind the beat or a bit ahead of the beat, but once you go into the recording studio where you're sitting there for 5 minutes and you're drumming before it, and you've got a producer sitting there, and he knows instinctively how to count beats, and you're not doing it.
No.
There's some professional protocol, I suppose, that these guys are looking at. So again, he's looking at the guitar playing of the other Beatles, and obviously they're proficient, because they've been playing for a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're playing well, even though those early songs that they're recording are pretty simple, but they're tight.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But you there's tight, and Pete could play along. That's fine. Pete Best can play. But then there's tight, and then there's another level. You bring
Yeah.
somebody really good in, and I've been in bands where this has happened. You play with your regular guy, and that works, and that's fine. And then you get maybe sometimes you get somebody who deps. He can't make it. Somebody can't make it. I remember once we did a gig with it, and with another drummer. We had another drummer. Our regular drummer couldn't make it, and this guy it was like made everything better.
Wow.
Made everything like. And I'm not saying our drummer then was bad. He was good. He's a good drummer. But somehow, this guy who came in, and he just came in for this one night and just played. He was just 20%. There was you just knew there were some songs, and you went, "What? How did we played that?" And it was fantastic. What did he do? Because the rest of us are still doing what we normally doing. And so I've had that experience myself where you get somebody in and you literally can get what I would describe within the band you get an extra 20%. Of kind of. I remember Mustang Sally. We used to play Mustang Sally, which is pretty simple song. And this guy came and he played it, and all of a sudden it kind of took off. He's like, you kind of look at it, it's okay, really? How could this be? Drumming is just drumming after all. It's sticks and wood and that and skins. How can it be different? And yet
Yeah.
it was. And I reckon that thing was Ringo. You get Ringo in, and all of a sudden you feel it's not. It's within the band they would have noticed. And it's not a little bit of a difference. It's like a load of difference.
So you know how we were talking about Glyn Jones a couple of shows ago, and how he became famous for miking drums in the
the
studio.
four mic trick. Yeah.
So again, George Martin was the Beatles were ahead of the game. They understood very early on from a rock and roll point of view how important getting a good drummer was. Not necessarily miking, from a technical point of view.
I don't feel.
But at least from a proficiency point of view, that's going to be able to feed off the rest of the band to get a good sound. So then it was taken one step further by Glenn by saying, well, look, we got to be able to hear those tom-toms. We want to hear Simon's floor drum, we want to hear it. We want to hear that foot pedal squeak.
Yeah. The interesting part for me in that is that as I've said before, that the production is all pre-recording.
Yep.
The whole thing. What you're going to put on, what you're going to commit to tape, is that there's no post recording messing about like you do now. You record the guitars all clean and add everything else post recording. Whereas then it was all pre-recorded. The sound you had was the sound you were going to get, and then it meant that everything was pre that. So things like, right, you're the drummer, so I've got to set you up, 6 feet from the microphone so that you're balanced with somebody who's the guitar player or singing, so that, and then the geography of the band, if you like, the distance from the mic, so that all becomes really important because what you want is a balanced recording. You don't want the drums to be, right up to the mics and then go, overpowering everything else. So everything has to be quite tightly organized, measured, and so that and you get to know. And Glyn Johns is just an advancement of that, isn't he? Where you're still saying, well, I'm going to put I'm not going to put a microphone right up. Now I'm going to put a microphone further back because and those things, those early rock and roll records, when the sax player, come through solo, he'd come up to the the singer's microphone, to swing it down, playing here, back up, and I'm singing again, kind of thing. It's because that's the only way you could do it. And then he's gone, 3 feet further back because that's where the balance of, he's in the background, but you can still hear him, kind of thing. But he's on, because that's the mix. The mix is where you are in relation to the microphone, not post. I'll just bring that up a bit solo up a bit. That's what you got. Hence the my classic example of that is Pretty Woman by Roy Orbison. That goes down, 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 down. That's because he forgot the riff. That's a mistake, And then in the third time he remembers it, and of course they've recorded it. It's a really good take. You don't want to go back and redo the beginning. You just go, "Well, don't work. Fine. Play half the riff twice." Doesn't sound like a mistake. Sounds like a deliberate thing. When actually it was, you know. And I read some accounts of that where, you know, there were like 15 people all running around pre-recording, setting it all up and getting it all organised, you know. But once you press the record button, that's it. You know, that's what you're going to get. And that's what they got, you know. They got got the mistake at the beginning.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
which
and
they
you
left,
know,
and then becomes a classic, you know, nobody knows, you know,
yeah.
kind of thing.
Well, you look at the mistake like with Hey Jude, you know, Paul's just singing some off the cuff lyrics, and to change the lyrics, and John says, "No, keep it, you know." Well, the movement you need is on your shoulder, you know. So, is that a mistake? Well, probably not, but that wasn't supposed to be the final lyric. But
Oh,
John
was it just
said,
made up? Was it? How interesting. Yeah. Yes, that people then just said, leave it. It's
"Yeah,
great, leave it. Well, it is
yeah,
great, isn't it?
yeah."
The
John
movement you
said,
need is on your shoulder is a fantastic line.
"Yeah, leave it." But I'm
Yeah.
looking forward, especially to listening to some of these outtakes on Abbey Road, because I was in the music shop this morning, Simon, and the manager of the music shop, he's a bass player and he plays in a local band, and he's a shit hot bass player. Bob's his name. So if Bob's watching this, g'day Bob.
Hello,
Shout out
Bob.
to Bob,
Yes.
the rock shop here in Hamilton. And we often talk about Paul McCartney, but he grabbed me when he saw me, ran over to me, and said, "I've got some information for you on why Paul McCartney and those last 4 albums he did with the Beatles, why his bass playing is so good." And I said, "What? What? Tell me." And he said, "What he did is that when he was recording with the drummer, he'd just play the chord, you know, to get the beat, and then he'd ditch that bass part, and that's when he would start doing his wonderful melodies with his
Melodic bass lines. Yeah. Brilliant bass player. Yeah.
so heavy and all that, dun, dun, you know, uh, uh, come together. Dun, 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 dun. He's
Yeah.
he's playing that after they've and I
After
went,
they recorded it.
ah, that makes perfect sense. That's
Yeah.
why it's so bloody good.
Yeah. Well, you know, yes, and it's my other favorite. Yeah, Paul McCartney. I mean, that's the point, isn't it? Fantastic bass player, fantastic
Oh,
musician, understood intrinsic musicality, you know, and that ability to then, as you say, to go back and then redo something in a completely different way to what you laid down, you know, and kind of think up a proper melodic bass part that, you know, really fits the song, but it's not, you know, that basic, as you said, that basic chord thing, kind of, you know, really good. Because the
genius.
other thing about it, yeah, genius. The other thing about it, of course, left-handed, which, well, and if you think about it, the thing about Paul McCartney being left-handed is that when him and John sang together, both their guitars pointed out
Yeah,
because
mirror.
you know they mirror opposite, you know, rather than they pointed the other way. There's a kind of symmetry, you know. They were able to approach the microphone together, and both their guitars went out the front like that, you know. And there's a kind of lovely kind of symmetry in that, you know, that being able to do that that most bands didn't have because most bands didn't have left-handed people in you know in them, which I think is, you know, really cool stuff. But yeah, you know, you know, Ringo, fantastic. You know, go and listen to his isolated drum tracks on, you know, if you want to hear, you know, that concert for George thing is just, you know, when he
Listen,
plays, just
nowhere man,
amazing swing, and you know,
nowhere.
and you know, and yes, and our Paul McCartney thing, yeah, Paul McCartney, you know, that's why I say, you know, I've said this to you before, you know, the Beatles are underrated, which sounds like a crazy thing to say, but actually, I think in many ways that is true. The Beatles are underrated. How how good they were, you know. I still think it's, you know, we haven't really fully got to the bottom of it. But things like you were just talking about, you know, that bass playing and stuff like that, and you know, Ringo's drumming, and you know, of course, Lennon and George Harrison as well, you know, fitted in. It's that fit, you know, they fitted it, you know, so that in a sense, probably individually, I mean, collectively, were greater than the sum of their parts. You know, they were great, but you know, I mean, you know, Paul McCartney on his own without John Lennon is not quite the same as the Beatles, is he? You know,
Oh, absolutely.
I'm not, doing down his solo career, but one is tempted to, say that John Lennon without Paul McCartney, not quite. Imagine, but you know, those, I think lot of other John Lennon stuff, solo stuff, would have been better if it were Lennon McCartney.
Yeah, yeah,
What Paul would have brought to those things that he didn't,
oh,
that nobody else could bring.
absolutely. What? And again, I suppose what we should do in one show is maybe we should plug in and play a little bit, maybe. But there's one thing that struck me about John Lennon when we were talking about Chuck Berry and the Stones a few shows ago, and we were saying how clearly Keith Richards was influenced by Chuck Berry.
Yeah.
You got to remember, John Lennon could rip off uh, uh, Chuck Berry too. Like for example, "I Want to Hold Your Hand," where they're going. Can you hear that? No, you can't.
No, get close. Turn it up.
So he's doing that himself. And
right,
the game
yeah.
on we'll plug in next week. Come Together, where he's going.
Yeah.
Very, very much influenced by Chuck Berry.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, obviously, but playing those rock and roll things, I can see that, can't you? They obviously did roll over Beethoven, didn't they, and stuff like that. So, Chuck Berry's, it's funny, isn't it? When I think of George Harrison, I think of Carl Perkins rather than Chuck Berry.
And you'd be right. And you'd be right. That chugging that you're hearing is either Paul McCartney or John Lennon.
Yeah. Yes, and then George doing his best Carl Perkins rather than his best Chuck Berry. It'd be close. So I'm not suggesting that he wasn't influenced by Chuck Berry as well, but that's kind of what I think about with maybe that's history. But that's interesting. Yeah. Oh, and I think that and that's another show. The greatness of Chuck Berry. Flawed human being, but an absolute maestro. In those, being able to combine that swinging rock and roll thing, being able to, good night, Soda, take care, man. That swing, but also, all those original, those kind of piano parts he translated onto guitar, and that brings a unique sound, and the lyrics as well. If you think about his lyrical, I mean, I think, that, he's the great rock and roll poet, Chuck Berry, and without that wordplay, those, the fun, the kind of cheeky, I think, that without him, then a lot of things not really, because I think that those, particularly the word stuff is, is a lot more fun and a lot more, kind of different ways of looking at things, Yeah, As I was motivating over the hill, I seen Maybelline in the Coupe de Ville. It's like, that's got nothing to it, man. It's like, come on. As I was motivating over the hill, it's like, that's brilliant, that is, to me, anyway, gives me a thrill.
Look, I agree with you. And, interesting how these guys from England, across the pond, latch onto it, grab it by the horns, and run with it. And you look at the Beatles version of "Roll Over Beethoven," the Stones version of "Roll Over Beethoven," and the original. Just magic. And Chuck didn't have a problem, did he? Because he was cashing in the check too, wasn't he?
Yeah, getting the money. See, he'd have been happy, wouldn't he? Yeah. And of course, the Electric Light Orchestra. Let's not no electric. It's Arvin's making a really good point. He says he thought it was genius how the Beatles managed to make that American originating music like Perkins and Berry sound British.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think Arvin, you're absolutely right. And that thing about take, I mean, I play in a covers band, so I have some feel for this. That when you cover a song, unless you're, if you're in a tribute band, that's different, because you're trying to go for as close as you can to the sound and whatever else. Now, I play in a covers band, not a tribute band. So, what you find is you do a song, doesn't matter what it is, and what happens is somewhere in the osmosis of you five guys, us playing it, it becomes us
Yep.
in a funny sort of way. And you just play it and you play it, in sort of like the original. It still sounds like you. What happens is you can take different songs from different artists and they start to sound more like, and you think, well, they're quite different songs. Yeah, if you play the original artist, they're quite different. But if we played them, then they start to sound a bit more of a piece, And I think that osmosis of yes. Good morning, Jack Daniels. How you doing? Hope you're good. Afternoon. I wish it was afternoon. No, I don't. Yeah, thanks for joining, Jack. That's very cool of you. So I think that kind of osmosis, and I think that you're right. When you listen to the Beatles version of Roll Over Beethoven, it's the Beatles version of it. They've brought something of it themselves into that. The Stones, exactly the same. All those cover records. It's still the Rolling Stones. It's still not Muddy Waters. And that's good, by the way. That's my word. That's a compliment. That's good. It absolutely is good. Is that if you can make a cover song and just not make it, somehow turn it into what your band is, then you've done a good job. And that's a different thing. And I have no beef against anybody who plays in a tribute band. But you're going for a different thing in a tribute band. You're going for the sound of the record, as close as you can. Yeah. The arrangement, the sound, maybe even the look, people dress up and all of that. And that's different. A tribute band is trying to not make your personality come out in that song, trying to make you sound like what the original sounded like. Yeah. I mean, I've seen lots of Beatles tribute bands, they sound more like the Beatles than the Beatles. I mean, in fact, I've seen some Stones ones.
Simon, and sorry for pointing out the obvious, though.
No.
But,
yeah, go on.
The Stones never really they never wanted to be a tribute band.
No, they didn't. No, completely, and that's the point.
Yeah, they were just they were just doing what they thought sounded good for what they were hearing.
Yeah. Oh no, completely. Yeah. And absolutely. And as I say, I think that they are two different things. If you see what I mean. Ooh, get off. So I'm just trying to type something, but this is not working. Let's do that. Yeah, no, I mean I agree with you. But it's interesting to me that they are two completely different things. And the Beatles never wanted to be a tribute act. They wanted to be, certainly covers. Certainly that's where they come from. You play the popular stuff to get going, but part of that is an education in how songs are constructed, isn't it? How they work, their internal mechanics.
I want to just highlight something else that you mentioned last week too, that has a connection with the Beatles. So you mentioned that Rory got his education playing in a show band, and so I've got that understanding here, because we had a lot of show bands here in this country where it was like for 3 hours and you had a bit of a comedy act and different types of and in a kind of interesting kind of way, if you listen to some of those early Beatles live recordings at the BBC, Simon, and they're playing at ballrooms and stuff like that, they were a semi kind of show band too, weren't they?
Completely,
is that an English thing, or you?
It probably is actually, yeah. But I think that, I mean, those early bands, they did start off as covers bands, didn't they?
Yep.
The Stones, the Beatles, And I guess the other guys other bands, when they started off playing other people's material. And then the Beatles precipitated that kind of boom in write your own songs. But previous to that, there've been a lot of, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of you know, people. I mean, like Chuck Berry wrote their own songs and stuff like that. There's a lot of pop music was covers, with the Brill Building and all of that. Carole King, writing songs, dozens of songs for other people to sing. And so much less of a tradition of people writing their own songs in a little band and playing them than before. And I think that you're right that the interesting thing is that education that we sort of touched on earlier, that education, not only of playing, rock and roll songs, but lest we forget, the Beatles' first recording was back in a singer called Tony Sheridan on My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, which isn't a very rock and roll song, whatever else it is, So that kind of broad education of Dave's not telling the truth.
I've seen Dave play. He's not a shit guitarist. He's a very, very good guitarist.
Yeah, Dave, stop that now. I've seen Dave play as well. Yeah, if that's rubbish, I want to get there. But my point about that Tony Sheridan thing is that it's not rock and roll. It's not a rock and roll song. It's a different. It's a much more traditional kind of folky sort of thing, and doesn't have a rock and roll structure kind of thing. So you can see them that their education is broader than just not this is a bad thing, broader than Chuck Berry and stuff like that. And when you get up to Sergeant Pepper's and stuff like that, Sergeant Pepper's and all those things, with the horns, and it's quite musical, and is different from just being a straight rock and roll band. But I think it's for your musical education and stuff like that. That thing about playing a lot of covers and does give you an education in a way that and an understanding of how songs are, even if you choose not to copy them, but a way of working out how songs are the mechanics of their internal structure and their construction and things. When you play a lot of them, you play a lot of different types of songs, you start to understand what intervals work, what intervals don't. As you say, what things you can play. If you're Paul McCartney, what things you can play that are really cool, what things that doesn't really. You just get to know that stuff, don't you? By doing it, and then when you come to, well, yes, Jack, you're absolutely right. Yeah, he says he's in awe of Hendrix playing Sergeant Pepper's the day it was released. Yeah. Yeah, that's class musician, that is. But you see, Jimi Hendrix is another one. Grew up, on the Chitlin circuit, playing covers, and playing, and playing things that that other people, and then obviously, before he started doing his own stuff, he could knock off all those blues songs and Chuck Berry and All Along the Watchtower, the classic cover, All Along the Watchtower, Bob Dylan, nothing like Bob Dylan, and yet, he's the classic version of it, made it his own. This is how I'm going to do it, kind of thing. And there's other, Jimi Hendrix did like a Rolling Stone as well. Bob Dylan, he loved Bob Dylan, but making them his own, and stuff, in a way. So I think there's a lot to be said for, that education of playing in covers bands and stuff, and giving you that ability to understand the mechanics and structure of songs.
Are we going to talk about in the series the personalities of the Stones? I know that we've always focused more on the music, the techniques, the influences of the bands or the individual we're talking about, but and I don't want to focus probably a lot, Simon, on the psychology, but maybe we could, because I think if you're going to talk about the Beatles, I think there is a component of their personality individually that had an effect on their success and
Yeah, yeah,
ultimately on the band ending.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, I think I mean, I think that one of the. I mean, I think for me, when the Beatles stop is when external influences start to take over. You know, like we talked because a couple of weeks ago we were talking about when they were making Abbey Road. John Lennon has a bed made in the studio for Yoko Ono. And it becomes not just a band in the studio with some songs worked out, and not they could still do it, and they still did it. They could put aside their financial aggro and all of that and go and record stuff together, completely. But I think that those external influences start to become more prevalent, and when those external things break into a band, the band's direction changes, and in this case, splitting up.
Well, I want to share an experience with you, and I'm keen to get some kind of feedback from you. So, like yourself, I've played, and I don't currently play in a band, but I've played in bands in the past. Okay, and the two first bands I played in, the undisputed leader of the band was the guy that knew the chords, knew the scales, knew the songs. Not necessarily a pleasant personality,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, um, but he knew how to do the stuff. So when I look at the Beatles and John Lennon, so John Lennon didn't know chords, couldn't tune a guitar. George Harrison comes along and shows him some chords, and the Silver Beatles had been going for about 6 months. So whatever John was playing or whatever he was doing,
Yeah,
guitar, um, was secondary to his singing and the leadership of the band. So George comes along, shows him how to basically play a guitar,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
and from my experience, that would have made George the leader.
yeah, 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 yeah. But clearly not, because actually the songwriting makes you, in a sense, didn't you? And but I think it's slightly more than that. In my experience, that the leader is the guy, girl, somebody who, yes, indeed, yeah,
That
is
that's
the
amazing. I'm
person.
sorry to interrupt, Simon, but
Oh, go on, interrupt this. Yeah, yeah, yeah. See
that's
what I
gold.
mean? Yeah.
Clapton looking at his mate, thinking,
Jesus.
"Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's fantastic. Yes, absolutely. But as I say, for me, the thing about it is that the leader of the band is the person who sets the tone of what the band is going to do, whatever it is, And so I think that that it's clear. I mean, the interesting thing about the Beatles, as you touched on earlier, it's not clear who the leader is, but I think that in effect the leaders are the people who wrote the majority of the material.
oh yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and so they are the de facto leaders. And I think that you could argue whether it's Paul or whether it's John, personality wise. Um,
early on it was John's band, and then Paul took over.
yeah, I would. That's what I was going to say. It feels like to me from externally that maybe George was a bit more of the leader, but not George. John was a bit more of the leader. But it does strike me that most bands you can think of have somebody who sets the tone of what the band is. What they're going to do. If you take the Stones, I think in the early days it was Brian. Wasn't it? This is what we're going to do. We're going to do blues, we're going to do, those power things shift, with the songwriting, because that's Jagger and Richards. Then the power things, moves to them, kind of
Yep.
thing, as being, the leaders. And I don't know, you could argue about who's the leader in the Stones these days. It kind of, but one of those two probably. Well, you see, Charlie is, there's obviously always the case for Charlie as well, because without Charlie, no Rolling Stones. But I don't think Charlie's the leader in that sense, if you see what I mean. But but I mean, I think almost, yeah,
Hey, Sonia.
Sonia, how you doing?
Nice to
Hope you're
see you,
good.
Sonia. You're back on social media.
Yeah, she's had a break. Well done. It's can get a bit much, can't it, sometimes? Yes, I mean, Jack makes a good point. Paul and John turned out to be the Glenn Fry and Don Henley of the Beatles. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that slight, those two guys were the leaders of the Eagles. Certainly later on, and
John,
that
John was gutted, Simon. He was gutted when George came out with his biography, and John's only mentioned once in it.
yeah, and probably a bit disparagingly.
Oh, no, it's not. It's not
Not
disparaging.
even that.
No, it's just because they were tight. They were John and George were tight. They they had a thing going on,
Yes, that's
and
true. Yeah.
they were tight. And again, I suppose I'm leading into maybe our fourth show. John Lennon, he was all over the place. He was. And is that a sign of a genius too? Inconsistent.
Yeah. Not necessarily fully rounded personality and stuff like that. Yeah, completely. I mean, I think but having that interest in that the other side of it with Paul, to kind of balance it off and kind of smooth it out a bit and kind of make it something a bit different. I think that's there's there's much to discuss in that in that relationship, isn't there? Between the two of them, what they each brought to the table, what they didn't, and then what they But it's like any team, isn't it? In any team, you should have disparate people who bring different things to the table, not a bunch of people who are the same, because that's not going to work. And I think the Beatles are a good example of a good team, because they brought different things to the table.
Oh
Stuff
yeah,
like that.
and Paul says it himself. John and him would write a couple of songs or have something together. They'd drive in to the studio, and he said it a few times. He said Ringo and George were hot because that would be the first time they would hear the song in the studio. 9 times out of 10.
But then off you'd go. Yeah. What they contributed to that song in terms of what they did, drumming, George's guitar and all that. Yeah. Not underestimated by any stretch.
How many times have you been in a band, Simon, when someone's given you something and you say, no, I've got to go home and practice it. 10 hours later, I'll come back.
Yeah. Completely.
Most people don't want to be put on the spot.
Yeah. Jack's making a good point about when it becomes a business, everyone loses sight of the relationship that started it all. Yeah. And Jack, I'm sure you've seen it, but that Eagles documentary, where they start off as a gang, and then it's Don Henley and Glenn Fry saying to Don Felder, "We are the keepers of the flame of the Eagles. You can come play with us and take a salary, or you can sling your hook. But now we're the keepers of the flame, and now it's a business, and now we're running it, and face facts, and it's not a gang of people playing music anymore." And I think probably every band goes through that. You start off as a gang, and at some point it becomes, indeed, yeah. I love Joe Walsh as well. James Gang. Found the James Gang in the late 70s, I think. Don't know how. Oh, I know how. A friend of mine had a compilation album on it. But yeah, completely. Dave, you're right. Pick any band. It starts off as a band of mates, and then at some point in their success curve, it turns into a business. And you've got to work out how to maintain the band thing within that business,
Okay,
that
so
business model that suddenly a lot of people
you're
are.
right. There's a famous YouTube clip where they're at Apple at the office, and there's a pile of documents, and the Beatles are standing there, and George sticks his head up and says, "For the record, I have no idea
What
what
I'm
I'm
signing.
what I'm
Yeah,
signing,"
yeah.
and
What this
he's
is.
got a very serious face. He's not joking. It's like,
No,
but
no,
again,
yeah.
and you look at the relationship. So you had Linda Eastman, and her family trying to manage the Beatles, and then you've got John Lennon saying, "No, no, let's go to Klein just to be well, what they reckon to be just
Yeah. Manager.
just
Yeah, yeah.
oppose Paul McCartney." Because Paul wants this guy. No, no. Well, and other people were saying to him, apparently, "Don't go with Klein. What are you doing?
Yeah,
What
yeah,
are you?"
yeah. No, I did completely. Yeah, well, the Stones went through the same thing, didn't they? The Alan Klein curve. But I think going back to my original point, that every band has to do it, and I think the successful bands find a way of doing it. Like my classic example of this is always is U2, who have managed to retain, and I think it's about songwriting. I think that all songs by U2 is actually one of the key things in that, because I've said this before on here that that often bands, they turn up, 3 years in, they suddenly go, why is the singer living in a mansion? I'm still living in a bloody council house, because he writes the songs and you don't, and all of a sudden he's got a shed load of money, that you're not a part of, and I think
Okay,
that
well,
creates kind of divisions and stuff. But
the Beatles then didn't succeed. The change of
no, they
management,
didn't. No,
the money
when
side of
Ryan Epstein died, and
was
yeah,
one of
yeah,
the contributing factors in the band
yeah,
folding.
yeah. It started to become a business, and that gets in the way of the artistic, core of your band and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, you find yourself at odds with other people, business odds. You're not creative odds, business odds. And I think you could say that about the Beatles. Is that they weren't at odds creatively; they were at odds business wise, and that because it had cut in and that's something. I'm conscious that we've been going for an hour and a half, and you said an hour and a
Oh,
half.
yeah, it's close to 7:30 in New Zealand. Hey, my
Yeah,
friend, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. And
indeed. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
shit,
We haven't.
I could go for another hour and a half, but I can't.
You've got things to. Apparently, you've got things to do. You have you got?
I
But the
look
question
forward.
is, have you got a million things to do?
No,
Your name's not Johnny Bean. You haven't got a million things to do.
no,
No,
no, I
quite
can't
right.
bullshit. It's just a couple
No,
of things I have to do in preparation for tomorrow.
that's fine. That's cool. I'm just here to
Um,
remind you that as we were going 1 hour and 38 minutes, and you said an hour and a half, it's probably a good place for
um,
us to stop.
so do you
Yeah,
think this is a good intro to a
yeah, yeah,
Beatles?
yeah.
Uh, what do you
We'll
guys
go,
in the chat think? Are you looking forward to
where are we
Simon?
going to go next?
Yeah, yeah. We're going to go backwards. We're going to start with Abbey Road, and go backwards rather than start from the front, because that's just what we do.
Yes, yeah, yeah, Dave. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. Well, yes. Mike Nesmith could play, couldn't he? But he was the one
He
who
was the
could
only
play
one.
in the
Oh,
Monkeys. Yeah, yeah.
the tambourine. Davy Jones could
Tambourine.
play
Davy Jones could play the tambourine. There you are. The triangle. Ting.
the drum. All right, Simon, can I
Dear.
get you to do the goodbye
Guys,
roll call?
we'll do the do barrel. So thanks to Dave Ars Guitars. Thanks, Dave, for dropping by and contributing. Fantastic. Jack Daniels, thanks very much. Sonia, nice to see you. And
Always.
Arvin, yeah. And Soda as well, who popped in and had to go to bed. It's very late. And hopefully I think
No,
I've got
appreciate
everybody.
it.
And I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah, appreciate guys you joining in and it's been really great fun. And we'll be back next week at the same time.
yeah, yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Take care, guys. See you soon. Bye.